Rose Van Reken.
Hello. This is the second lesson in a series on archaeology and everyday life in Bible times. This is part of a series sponsored by the Greater Chicago Sunday School Association called Adventures in Learning. I'm Rose Van Reken, and I have the happy privilege of being your teacher during this course. You will remember that the last time we met, we looked at some unexpected discoveries archaeologists have made. The first one we looked at was a 17-foot arch, which had been found in the backyard of a man in a mound. It had been completely buried and was a surprise to this man and to his neighbors. And then we saw the beautiful mosaic floor of a 6th century Byzantine church in Amman, Jordan. The floor was under 5 feet of dirt in a man's garden. Who would have guessed it was there? We took a brief look at what is called one of the key finds of the 20th century, the Dead Sea Scrolls, ancient manuscripts that are 1,000 years older than any other known copies of Old Testament books. These surprising documents had been lying in caves like this for over 1,900 years before they were accidentally found by a goat herd. Scholars are now studying them and comparing them with our modern versions of the Bible. And then we looked at the harbor city called Caesarea, a 164-acre city built by Herod the Great. Caesarea played a big part in the history of the early church. Acts 23:23 to Acts 26 all took place in Caesarea, which had become the capital of Palestine after 6 A.D. Besides the huge aqueduct which brought water into that city from the mountains 12 miles away, here you see only the portion of it that is uncovered, the rest is still under sand, and the amphitheater which has been dug out and restored and holds 4,000 people, and who knows if audiences here heard Philip, who lived in Caesarea, or Peter or Paul. Besides that aqueduct and the amphitheater, we looked at a stone. It was made by Pilate, whose official residence was in Caesarea, to dedicate a memorial that Pilate had made for Tiberius Caesar of Rome. This engraved stone, centuries later, had been used to replace a broken stair in the amphitheater. And in 1951, archaeologists found it there. It was a great find because the names of Tiberius Caesar and Pontius Pilate the prefect were engraved on it, both names. Critics had scoffed that there was no basis to the scriptural reference to Pilate's official role in government. But here is a stone to confirm this small piece of historical data recorded by gospel writers. Keep alert for more news about this great city of Caesarea and its harbor, for although it is buried under 10 feet of sand and water, volunteer archaeological teams work here every summer to unlock the secrets of this unusual ancient seaport. But when we want to find the most common way in which we learn about how people lived in ancient times, we have to think of those people who dig in tells. Now, it may be that you're not sure what a tell is. Let me show you. In ancient times, when people traveled from one place to another, the first place they had to look and the first thing they had to find was water. You remember that in the early chapters of Genesis, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, when they moved from place to place, always dug a well. Chapter 24, I believe it is, of Genesis tells us perhaps 8 wells that Isaac had to dig because water was a very scarce commodity. And in order to find a place to live, you had to find water. Once water was secured, if you were the father of a clan, you could decide that your group would live there. And you would look for the rise in the land, if there were one, because it would be a little bit more secure. Otherwise, you would build on the flat, level territory. And you would put on your tents or your clay houses, clay brick, whatever it would be, and that's where you would live with your flocks on the outside. And then it was that after you had lived there for a while, someone else might have come along, someone stronger than you, and might have thought he wanted your flocks. Or perhaps he wanted to take your people into captivity. He wanted to conquer you. And so he came and he destroyed your city. And it became rubble. Maybe the people were all carried away. Their flocks were taken. And in time, the winds blew over, carried debris. First thing you knew, this city was completely covered, and people hardly knew that it had existed. Another group came along, maybe 100 years later. They decided, look, we could have our well here. And look, we could build on this elevation. So what did they do? Did they dig to rock bottom, as you and I would do when we dig and build our houses or our big buildings today? Oh, no, they would build on top of the rubble of the city before. Perhaps they might even build a wall for more protection. But maybe an earthquake came, maybe there was a fire, which was a disaster. Perhaps even a sickness would decimate the people. And so in time, again, this city would be destroyed. And once more, we have a layer of ruins. Now, this continued all through the centuries, so that a tell is nothing more than a layer cake of dead cities, one built on top of the other. When an archaeologist comes along and wants to work on a tell like this, he sees that it is a city which has a flat top. It is a mound with a flat top. And he knows that most likely this is a place where all ancient cities are buried. Sometimes these tells are 100 feet high, and they may hold as many as 20 cities, which are all on top of each other, buried. So when the archaeologist comes and wants to dig in this tell to see how people lived, he has to follow certain procedures. And the procedures that he follows are first a very careful study of the site. They look at it and most likely will send a photographer up in an airplane to take pictures of this site. Why? Because if there are short shadows, then he can see there was a wall. If there is a slight rise, perhaps there was a city gate or a tower. If there are heavier shadows, it might be that there was greater growth of vegetation because there was a grave underneath. And so they are able to determine a little bit the formation of the city. Knowing this, they will perhaps do one of two things. They will either dig a trench, which is something like this, which they dig all the way through to the bottom to see how many layers they can cover in that trench. Or they might dig a trial shaft, which goes right down through the middle of the tell, and it shows them the different occupational levels, and they can see how many cities there were in these particular tells. Megiddo was such a tell. It has 20 cities on top of each other. Gibeon was such a tell. It has 5 cities. Dothan has 21. It may surprise you that if you were to go to Jerusalem today, you would find that the city of Jerusalem, although built on hills, is still about 35 feet higher than it was in the days when Jesus walked on the earth. If people say to you that they're going to walk where Jesus walked, they're going to, in many ways, have a hard time. You might have to go all the way into a basement of a building in Jerusalem and then into a sub-area just to come to the Roman roads that were found there. Well, then the archaeologist will make a contour map. After he's done that, he will mark off this mound. He will put it in sections. Each section has a name and it has a letter, so that they will be able to know exactly what part they are digging in and what they are finding. After he has done that, then it will be his responsibility to get the people, the people who are to work on this particular tell. Getting people together isn't always so easy. There is the general director who has the interest of digging in the tell, and then he has to find his pickmen and his diggers. This may be quite a few people who work with pickaxes, with shovels, with trowels, even with dental picks and with soft brushes. And they have to use these tools because they are finding the things that were buried by the generations of people who lived in that area. They will have dirt people who work to pick up the dirt and to carry it away. Because all the dirt that you have on that tell where you are working has to be removed. That will show you, of course, what a terribly hard job it is, because some of these tells are 25 acres, 15 acres, 35 acres. You know there's no way they're going to be able to carry off all that dirt. So they have to be very careful where they start. Then they need a photographer who will take a picture of everything that they find. If they find pottery, he takes a picture of it when they find it. If they find skeletons, they take pictures of it. Everything has to be recorded. The people have to work constantly to keep accurate records of all of these things. They will also need an architect and an engineer and a pottery specialist. These are all important people who have to work on a tell. Now, of late, they find out that they can even use plant and animal experts, because not only do they find man-made removable things like pots and like jewelry, but they also have non-removable things which will be broken if they remove them, like floors, walls, cisterns, towers. And they will also find natural things like seeds. That's why they need the plant and animal experts, because seeds will show them what the people ate, what fruits they had. Animal bones, because the animal bones will tell them if the animals were domesticated or if they were cooked and the people ate them, what kind they were. Even snails are important. There is a dig in Illinois called the Custer Dig in southern Illinois. Snails are very important there because there are water snails and there are dry land snails. So they can tell about them as they work. So now we have all the people together and the archaeologist is going to start to dig. He begins at the top. He takes off the top layer first. After he takes off that top layer, he can work for the next layer, but you can't do the second layer until the first layer is completely removed. And once removed, you have taken away all the evidence of that layer. That's why recording is so extremely important. Usually, archaeologists will work for 3 to 5 months, usually during the summertime. And that they will work, and then after they're finished, they take everything that they find and they put it on display. They put on display all the pottery and the statuary and the shells and the seals and the inscriptions and all the coins and jewelry and whatever it is that they have found. Their records and their photography is complete. And then a man from the government museum comes and looks it all over. He takes exactly what he wants. That's why archaeologists today cannot take home so many of the things as they could in times past, because the governments are much more careful about the things they want to keep in their homeland. Once that is finished and the records are complete, then the people who worked on the tells may go back to their homes and come back again on another season. I would like to show you a few slides just to show you what these tells were like. In the distance is a tell. A tell can be distinguished from a regular hill by its flat top and generally evenly sloping sides. For ages, people did not realize that these were just layer cakes of dead cities, one built on the ruins of the other. This is a beautiful mound, all covered with vegetation. Now, if that were your property, would you want an archaeologist with 30 to 200 people to come and work over your land? Sometimes such permission is hard to come by. This is now Dothan, a 25-acre tell, 9.5 miles north of the city of Samaria. It is 10 acres on top, and the sides cover another 15 acres. It is 200 feet high and has 21 cities. I'll have more to say about that tell in a little while. You can see that some archaeologist has been on work about in the center of the tell. The sloping sides, which are often covered with potsherds, which are broken pieces of pottery, is an indication that this also is a tell. Often cities were located near a road, as you can see in this aerial view of a tell. Farmlands flank the tell, and sometimes farmers plant vineyards and orchards on top of a tell. That's really good because such growth prevents erosion and sort of preserves the tell. This mound has a peculiar shape. It's rather squarish, which indicates the presence of fortifications and walls. Most likely, the main city gate will face the road, and the important buildings would be found on that side, too. Here are tourists standing on the tell Jericho. Catherine Kenyon did a lot of work here, and among other things, she learned that Jericho is the oldest known city in the world, and it is also the lowest. Jericho is over 1,200 feet below sea level, near the northern end of the Dead Sea. You can see some of the walls uncovered by the archaeologists. Remember, before the team begins to dig, the tell is divided into sections. Each section is called, these parts between, which are a partition, are called a balk. It ensures that each level will be accurate. Here we see the side of a balk. Each level is tagged, and you can see the black burning pit at the top. This is an intrusion. Intrusions are found below the level to which they belong, like graves or reservoirs or wells or cisterns. Each level, you know, has to be totally removed before the next one is begun. And all the fortifications or city walls or gates or marketplaces or shops or places of worship or private homes, all have been knocked down, but all are identifiable. Here is a girl who has come across a skeleton as she worked down in her section. She's working now with dental picks and a soft brush to clear away the dirt from the bones. Then the exact position of the skeleton can be shown for recording. Sometimes the bones are impregnated with a hardening material so that they can be removed for further study, like the age of the person at death or the possible diseases or injuries. Often, many articles or artifacts are found in the graves. Many times, these bodies are carefully buried in another spot after examination. Lots of pottery is found in every excavation. Baked pottery is washed and examined. Usually piles of broken pottery called potsherds are made at each site because of the abundance of pottery used throughout ancient history. Sometimes certain parts of a certain pot are found to make its reconstruction possible. This is a job for those who enjoyed making puzzles before they joined the team. So you see, an archaeological expedition can really use everyone. Do you realize that now there are 5,000 known sites or tells or monuments in the Middle East? They have only dug in about 400 of these, and 40 of them have been extensively examined. So you can see how much information there is that is still hid in the tells. There were 200 active archaeologists in Israel alone this year, and this will tell us that the information that is coming out is so momentous that I think we should pay attention when we find articles that come across our desks. I would like to tell you how I became interested in archaeology. I heard a man, Dr. Joseph Free, who spoke in one of the Calvin College alumni lecture series I attended. He was working on Dothan. Now, Dothan is a city in northern Israel where Joseph went to look for his brothers and where Elisha the prophet lived. And each year, Dr. Free would go with his wife and they would work on this tell. The part that I remembered about his lecture was this. He said, you know, I worked on that tell for a few years and I thought, what if someone should take this tell away from me and say, look, we don't want you to work here anymore? What would I do? So he said, I told my men, please see if you could buy that tell for me. And the next year when he came back, they said, Dr. Free, it's all done. The tell is yours. And Dr. Free said, I looked at it and I thought to myself, just imagine, he said. I told the people, it's all mine. Everything I see is mine. Nobody can keep it from me anymore. And one of the men said to him, but Dr. Free, not really all of it because you didn't buy the trees. And he said, didn't buy the trees? Don't they come with the land? And he said, oh no, the land is separate and the trees are separate. How much would the trees cost? $700. Would you please buy the trees for me? And so they did. And then it all belonged to Dr. Free. Well, he said, the next year I was teaching Old Testament as I did every year, and I came across the 23rd chapter of Genesis. And in that chapter, we read about Sarah having died, and Abraham wanted to have a place to bury her. So he didn't have any land, you know. He always lived in a tent. He wasn't like his nephew Lot, who had a house in Sodom. Abraham never had a house, never had land. So he went to the children of Heth, and he asked them if he might buy a parcel of land on which was the cave of Machpelah. And after some talking back and forth, he paid a good price for the land, and it became his. Well, then Dr. Free read this verse, the 17th verse of Genesis 23. And the field of Ephron, which was in Machpelah, which was before Mamre, the field and the cave which was therein, and all the trees that were in the field, that were in all the borders round about, were made sure unto Abraham for a possession. And he thought, look at that, the field, the cave, the trees. And he went back to the original, and he found out 3 separate purchases. He had read it before, but he had never noticed what it really said. My son-in-law tells me that the same policy is true in Ethiopia, in which he grew up. Trees are sold separately from the land. Now, in our next lesson, we are going to have Mrs. Ruby Free with us. She was with her husband on this tell, working for many years in Dothan, and she is going to be with us so that we can see from her experience what we can learn. Well, I thought to myself, if that's true that Dr. Free learned from what he had studied in archaeology, that it meant more to him in his study of the scriptures, I must be missing a lot. So I was determined I was going to try to read a little more carefully. Well, it was at the table not long after that, when I was reading this Bible story to our children. I said to them, as we came to Mark, the 2nd chapter, the story of the paralytic, we read this. And they came unto Jesus, bringing one sick of the palsy. And I said to one of my boys, what does that mean, sick of the palsy? What do you suppose that is? And he thought a minute, and he said, I guess he had the palsy, and he was sick of it. And I thought, that's exactly what it says. But it's not what I would have thought. Because to me, when I read Bible, I read it differently. If you said my neighbor was sick of the measles, I'd say, yes, he's sick of it. But not this way. Shortly after that, I heard a story about one of our kindergarten teacher named Miss Bowles at the school where our children attended, used to have the children tell the Bible story the next day that she had told the day before. So one of these little children was telling the story about Adam and Eve and told how God took them out of the garden, and he put angels in front of the gate, and he put swords with fire there, and he said to Adam and Eve, you get in the car. And they got in the car, and God took them to a faraway place so they couldn't ever go back to the Garden of Eden again. And Miss Bolt thought, where in the world did she get the idea that God told them to go in a car? So she looked back, and what did she read in her Bible but that God drove them out of the garden? What other way was there for God to do this in that little girl's mind? She read, she heard, and she understood. More, I thought, perhaps than I did. Well, it was not long after that I went to visit an old friend of mine. She was in her 80s, and I brought her a book. And she said to me, is it an easy book to read, Rosie? She was kind of Dutchy. And I said, oh, yes, it's a simple book to read. You will really enjoy it. And then she looked at me with her big brown eyes, and she said, because I don't like to read and think at the same time. And I thought, there's my trouble in a nutshell. Reading and thinking at the same time when I read the Bible. So that's what I tried to do. And I hope that these little stories will, for you, help you so that you will read and think at the same time as you read this beautiful, beautiful book which God has given to us. Because in this book, we are going to learn that the very smallest details have proven to be true. We learn that the little incidental remarks which this book carries are going to be confirmed by the things that we find in Scripture. And that makes us so happy, because you and I, we really don't need the findings of archaeology, do we, in order to confirm our faith. We believe what this book says. We know that in the Old Testament it tells us the stories of God's people and how they were prepared for the coming of the Messiah. And yet we know, too, that many times the children of Israel, in their dealings, dealt with other countries and with other peoples and with other nations and other areas. The Bible oftentimes just casually mentions these things. It doesn't make a big deal of it. And yet, do you know that when archaeologists dig in Babylon or in Nineveh or in Egypt or in Edom or in other countries that surrounded Israel, do you know that oftentimes they find the very same story told that was mentioned here in the scriptures? I think that's what makes Bible reading much more interesting for us today, because we are aware of some of the things that the archaeologists have found. I have been laying a foundation for you. I hope that in the next lessons, you will see some of these beautiful things which archaeology and the archaeologists have taught us. I'll see you again with Mrs. Free, who is now Mrs. Kenneth Geezer, in our next lesson.
We will wait on the Lord. You must wait.